All right, we're live on the air for our Kafedka Google Hangout. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This one I'm really excited about because when Kafedka kind of came about, it's the circles that I run in. It's a bunch of video content creators and production guys. So this is kind of where the whole idea started. And one of the people we always had had our eye on to get involved is on with us today, and I want to give him a chance to introduce himself. An unbelievable career. It so happened that he got to stay in the same city, it seems like, for almost his entire career. Imry, why don't you introduce yourself and let the people know who you are and kind of your history.
Sure. So my name is Imry Halevi. I am currently the Director of Multimedia and Production at Harvard University. I've had this job for a little over 3 years now. Before that, I was at Northeastern University, also in Boston, as Associate Director of Video Production. And before that, I was at Boston University, mostly as a student, but also working as part of the production team there at Aganis Arena, which is a brand new arena that opened while I was a student at BU, featuring mostly BU hockey and some other events. So backtracking from that, that's how I slowly got into it.
Now, Imry's with us tonight. Chip Fontanazza from UCF is also with us here tonight. Chip, why don't you give us a little bit of insight about your role on the video production side and kind of how you get involved with the guys down there with the Knights?
Yeah, my job with the video production side, mainly during games now, is I'm trying to gather a lot of the content that we're shooting so we can repurpose it for the web. I mean, I did do a lot of camera work for them and did some this past season football-wise. But now I just realize it's more valuable for me to spend my time getting the content uploaded as quickly as we can, because we have a lot of talented people that work on that production side. They do web streams, video board production, pretty much everything that they need to do with the school. And Imry, one thing I know that you touched on before we started this broadcast was the difference between doing a video board production and a web stream production. And just, I'm just interested to get your thoughts on that.
Sure. So at Harvard, 2 of our venues have video boards. Harvard Stadium, where we play football and lacrosse, and the Bright Landry Hockey Center, where we play ice hockey. Those have video boards, and we don't really have the luxury of doing 2 separate productions for video board and for stream. And so for those venues where we have hockey games and football and lacrosse games, we really have to tell 2 stories. We have 2 different target audiences. A target audience in the venue that cares about entertainment, cares about big replays and big graphics and pump-up videos and big features and interesting things to keep them engaged. They don't care about wide-angle shots of the game. Our venues are pretty small. They can just look down and watch the game, as opposed to people at home who want a narrative. They want to see wide-angle shots. They want to see replays. They want to see subtle graphics. And they want someone, commentators, videos, graphics, to tell them a narrative of what's going on. And so you really have to keep both of those in mind while trying to cater to both kind of at the same time and figure out how you manage those.
Now, Imry, you're kind of one of the leaders kind of in the being very creative with some of what you guys do. A lot of it has to do with how much you have to do. And then obviously some of the sports you're able to really shine with some of the quality of what you guys are able to do with the ingenuity, the creativity. Take us through kind of, not a lot of us have to deal with this because we don't have 47 or whatever it is sports that Harvard has, but what are kind of the broadcast pressures and the amount that you have to put out at one time? I've seen you tweet that you've had multiple venues going with multiple sports. What are some of the differences between the Ivies and what we kind of deal with at the traditional, not traditional, the non-Ivies, I guess, in the broadcast world?
Well, we have 42 teams, not that 47.
I overshot it, sorry.
But we try very much to put an emphasis on all of them. We're not a big football school. We're not a big hockey school. We're not a big basketball school. We're a big athletic school. Harvard prides itself on providing athletics opportunities for as many of its students as is possible. And so we really want to give, in terms of video production and streaming, the kind of coverage we can to all the teams. It's not about just a few. But realizing that not all the teams are created equal in terms of facilities and logistics and audiences. Football games Our stadium seats 30,000 people. It doesn't get filled often, but there are 30,000 seats there. And we get a lot of people watching hockey and basketball and football online. The other sports get viewers as well, but not nearly as much. It's mostly parents and friends and relatives and people who are really specifically interested about that sport. And so we constantly try to figure out what we can do, how we can keep that balance. We really want all our productions to look good. They're obviously all in HD. They're obviously all consistent. They all have the same look and feel. They all have the same graphics package. But we really want to make sure that we somehow balance our resources. We can't afford to do an ESPN3 level production for all our sports, especially, as you mentioned, we have a lot of them happening at the same time. We often have 4 games at once. We've had more than that. And so what kind of attention we give them? We have a central control room on campus that serves the hockey rink and serves the stadium. And so whenever there's a hockey game or a football or lacrosse game, we run a big production out of that control room. Productions that can go on ESPN3, or we partner with regional networks here like the New England Sports Network and others to make sure the productions are really high level. When we have other productions at the same time, we balance it. We don't use a control room. We don't use as many cameras or replay or as many of the nice broadcast elements, and we try to make sure that we give it something. We give it a good product while balancing our resources.
And I want to give Chip a chance to ask about content and how you include it in some of your broadcasts coming up here next. But you talked about data analytics on how to kind of make decisions about what you're doing, how you're doing it. What are the numbers you're looking at, and how do you take those numbers and present to those that will allow you to make that decision? Because I know this comes up a lot. How do you pull back on one because the data really shows that you could or should?
Right. It's all about degree. We're not going to stop supporting a sport because of viewership. If not enough people are watching our export, our field hockey, or our volleyball, our wrestling, we're not going to stop supporting it. It's how many resources we can put behind it. We use Google Analytics. The Ivy League Digital Network, which is our central streaming website, works. It's backed by New Lion, and New Lion has Google Analytics code in it, so we can easily see how many people watch it, where they're watching from, what kind of platform they're using. We use all that data. And we get data from all the other networks we're on. If it's ESPN3, we get viewership. If it's TV, we get ratings. And so we try to compile all of those. We also have to keep in mind the kind of viewers. For example, rowing, we stream all our rowing events, and those are very well watched. A lot of people are very passionate about rowing. They're also extremely international, the kind of viewers we get. Hockey, we get a lot of people from the US and Canada as expected, and if some players have parents from Europe, we see that as well. Rowing, I think we had the Harvard Yale Regatta last year, which was very big. We had viewers from 27 different countries, which is even a lot for us. And so we want to keep that in mind. Harvard is an international university. We try to recruit international student athletes, and so that's something that's taken into account, even if it doesn't affect the overall viewership as much.
Now, from a content standpoint, when you create features for the video boards, is it something you use kind of just for the video boards? You try to repurpose it on social media and the internet, or what? Or what do you do with the content that you produce when you produce it?
Well, it's not just video boards. We really want a discussion we often have internally and externally is, why are we doing this? Streaming is nice and it's my job. I enjoy it, so that's why I'm doing it. But why is Harvard or any university investing time and money and resources in streaming and video boards, any kind of production? The answer we come up with every single time is telling our story. Harvard has a distinctive story. Every university has a distinctive story. What makes our university different? Why should people come here? Why should people care? And so everything we do, all the resources is towards telling that story, and we can tell that story with features. We can tell that story by interviewing athletes, by following athletes around, by interviewing coaches, by finding nuggets, finding stories that are worthy of attention, and incorporating them into everything we do. So as you mentioned, that falls into video boards. Whenever there is intermission or halftime or a break, commercial break, we try to incorporate that so people in our venues can see what makes us special. But we do that a lot in our streaming as well. When we started out, a lot of our dead airtime when TV went to commercial or we were at halftime, we would just put a spinning logo up or a wide-angle camera with a graphic that said, "We'll be right back." We don't do that anymore, ever. From the smallest production to the biggest production, we always make sure we have content for filler with the goal of telling our story. And we make sure that all our equipment, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, supports that capability, supports the ability to play back content when we don't have something live. It's very, very important for us.
I actually have another follow-up
Yeah,
question for you, too. You mentioned about doing the rowing streams. We did one at UCF, and that was probably one of the more complex streams that we had to do. But just from your standpoint, what is it that you had to do to make that a successful stream? Because that's different than setting just cameras up in an arena.
it's very different. There are really two different kinds of doing rowing. One is having a remote camera on a launch, following the race, transmitting back to a central control room and doing all the work from there, or doing all the work on the launch and just transmitting to the cloud from the launch. And that's what we do. We decided, because of resources, we usually have baseball and softball and lacrosse going on as rowing is going on. We decided to keep rowing contained, and everything we do is from the launch. Our rowing broadcasts are usually one camera, and historically, last few years, what we've had is one camera, two commentators on the same boat. Everything goes to one central laptop that has Wirecast on it, and the director operating Wirecast can show the camera, or if there's a break, show a feature video, add any graphics, add a clock. You know, rowing is not, there's no score, but there's a clock, so we make sure there's a clock relevant to what's going on. When I was at Northeastern, we actually had a little waterproof GPS device, and we did a Google map of our route and had the little GPS dot following us along. It was a lot of fun. It looked great. It crashed the MacBook Pro, so I stopped. But it was a nice idea. I like to talk about it. And so we really tried to keep it contained. Our big problem, as I'm sure you know, is connectivity. How do you get, you can do a nice production on a boat. You have to think about power, but how do you get it off the boat into the cloud? We have in the past used a Verizon Jetpack, like a 4G card. It's been okay. What we're starting to move to now are bonded cellular solutions like LiveView or TVU. We used a TVU backpack for the Harvard Yale Regatta this past year, and it was great. There were no dropouts in signal. It didn't matter if we were going under a bridge, or it just saved us a lot of headaches. So we did that. This year, our plan is we're trying to simplify it, because we figured out transmission with TVU backpack. And next thing to simplify is power. The launch is, it's a little motor boat. There's not much on it, and there's definitely no power. We used to use this little Black & Decker mobile power station that gave us 2 hours of power. Just wasn't enough. We were using too much of it. So we worked with JVC to develop a new camera, their GY-HM200, that they announced, and I think is coming out very soon, that allows you to create and edit and control a full scorebug with clock from within the camera. And so you can have commentators connected to the camera. The camera in itself generates the graphic. You can connect to a camera with a controller or your phone and start and stop a clock, bring in data, enter teams, everything you need. And then you can either stream straight from the camera, or in our case, take an SDI out from the camera into the TVU pack and stream it like that. And cameras don't nearly run out of battery as quickly as MacBook Pros, so that's our plan for this year.
Gotcha.
So there's some of the creativity, the ingenuity that we talked about that makes Imry very special and very well touted amongst the college athletics world. Hey, if you want to interact with us, hit us on Twitter at Cafedka, or use the hashtag CafedkaChat. I've got it pulled up right now. Actually, a couple people texted me asking how they could ask questions, so we'll be looking for some of those coming up here in a little bit. Imry, what is the most important thing to you in a production when you could have all the things you want to have? I know you're talking about a single camera. I know that's not what you want, but you can't do everything. But at those high-level sports where you're able to kind of, quote, ball out, if you will, what is the most important thing to you? What's the thing that you can't do without?
I think it's from the little productions to the big productions, it's the little details that make the difference. And I see it all the time. I see giant productions that look horrible and little productions that look great. And I get these questions all the time of, oh, how many cameras did you use for this game? Or did you put a camera behind the backboard? Did you put a camera in the net for hockey? And everybody's talking about pylon cams now for football. It's not about that. If your tripod isn't level, and if your camera isn't white balanced, and if your commentators are too loud or too soft or are not good, it doesn't matter how much money you spend on everything else. And so that's something that I focus on everything. Every single production we do, and it's what I care about the most. It's the little details. It's knowing what to look for. It's looking at something and listening to something and saying, you know what, this doesn't look good. It's going to cost us $0 to spend 10 extra minutes to make it perfect, to make sure that the camera is showing what you want it to show and that it moves the way you want it to move, that the audio sounds good, that everything is perfect. It's those little details that those don't cost anything. So that's what I really like to focus on.
Can you kind of give an example of just one of the productions you've done that, say, maybe was just a one-camera shoot, but you maybe had some graphics or did something to make it look clean and look good for people to watch?
Sure. Actually, rowing is a good example of that. Last year we did a rowing broadcast, just one camera. I talk about leveling the tripod. That's quite difficult when you're on a boat. But we did lineup graphics. A side panel that had the order of rowers per boat. It's who's rowing in every boat and what seat they're sitting. Hometown. I think that's it. Hometown and what seat they're sitting. And that was great. You don't typically see that in rowing production for colleges because everybody's just trying to do what we're working on, what you're working on. It's how do you get the signal off the boat? How do you get power? How do you even start? And so it's those little things. We do that for wrestling as well. Wrestling, we broadcast with just one camera, sometimes two. Wrestling is very tricky in terms of scoring because if you do it right, if you watch ESPN wrestling, there are 4 names. There are 2 school names and 2 actual wrestler names that change often. There are 4 scores for the school, scores for the wrestlers. There are 2 clocks. There's riding time, and then there's the clock. There's a period. There's a weight. There's just so much information to squeeze into that scoreboard. So most people just say, never mind. I'll put the 2 schools and their overall score, and I'll just move on. But when we did a little bit more, when we said, you know what, let's just figure this out and make it look right, we got great feedback. People say, okay, now I can follow it. Now I know what's going on. It's a conversation that the NFL has right now. It's what's better for watching an NFL game, sitting in the stadium or sitting at home? If you're sitting at a wrestling match, you can see all the information. There are scoreboards around you. It's not like that if you sit at home. So we're trying to match that experience, making sure that people have the same experience in both locations.
Now, let me ask a follow-up to that. And again, send us your Twitter questions. I've got one queued up here. But let me ask a follow-up because you opened a door. People in our position sometimes get beaten up for taking away from attendance, maybe even, or ticket sales, because you just said, how do you make the at-home experience the same as the in-venue experience, and you probably just took some revenue away. How do you justify that? What I always like to say is, if that person can't be there, you don't want to keep them from, and everybody knows one of my favorite phrases is, you want to make them a better fan. Just because they can't be there, you don't want to take that away from them. What's your thought on that?
We've had this conversation, as I'm sure everybody has, and my answer is always, let's try to convey what's going on in the venue in the most exciting and accurate way possible so that if that person has the means and the logistics to come to a game, they'll want to come to a game. Because you can easily show a game with no ambient sound, never show fan shots, just show a hockey game going on, for example, and people will say, good, a hockey game, thank you, but they don't realize how much work goes into entertaining people in the venue and how fun it is. And so we try to convey that. We have ambient mics everywhere. We show fan shots. We try to show that there are things going on, that it's fun. I don't know if it works. I don't know if it's not. We have no metrics on that, but I completely agree that it's something that we're very mindful of. We want to make sure that we're not taking away from venue attendance because it is important. That's what the athletes want.
And I've heard the argument that you don't want to show the fun because you want them to not see what the fun is. So it's kind of, the argument is there's holes in all the arguments. But I think you're right. Showing that it is fun and that you could have fun, there's more fun to be had, is one definite way to approach that situation.
Right. That's what we try to do.
So a couple questions here on Twitter. Let me get to this first one. It actually goes back to your multiple events in a given day. This is from Nina Raspa, who's at Delaware with me. She says, how do you allocate resources and employees on those multiple event days where you're kind of equipment and people strapped?
We try never to say no. We used to. If there were too many games in one given day, we would say, you know what, we have to cut it off at some point, and you field hockey or you volleyball, you're not going to get a stream today, which went over really, really poorly with coaches and with athletes and with viewers, and I appreciate that. They said, just give us something. Even if it's the bare minimum, we just want to watch the game, and I appreciate that. And so we stopped doing it. And so we try to, whenever we have multiple games at once, Try to have the base staffing for everything so that you can get a broadcast off the ground. And the base staffing for us is having a camera, is having a commentator, is having a director. We always want more, but with 3 people, we can make it work. So we give that to all base levels, and then we build up from there. See, okay, well, we have extra staff. Where do we need the extra staff? And it's something we discussed earlier. We have video boards in some venues, and therefore they require more attention. We can get away with non-video board productions with having 3 people because at home it's going to look fine. But if we have a video board, you can't not have replays on the video board. You can't not have graphics on the video board. You can't not have music in the venue. And so those, just because of logistics, tend to get more staffing. But we do try to even it out. We try to make sure that we have someone everywhere.
What's your hierarchy? How do you decide your hierarchy of who's the you at the other venue? How do you? I know you said you had 2 interns, but is there? Do you have seniority? How do you kind of make those decisions when it comes to students?
It's not seniority. Obviously, some people are more experienced at doing certain things than others. It's mostly, we're doing a lot of TV games now, and so it's mostly about audience and destinations. If it's a game that's on linear TV, I tend to do that myself just because there are more things that tend to go wrong and more people who would get upset if something goes wrong. And then just trickle down from there. It's how comfortable people are. But I try to give an opportunity. It's a common question I get when I hire new students is, well, how long do I have to be here until I get to do replay for a football game? So, well, when you're ready, you can do replay for a football game. There's no seniority. It's when you're good enough, I will put you there. So I like to give people the opportunity to try different things and do different things, and if they prove themselves, that's great.
Well, this was one of my questions that I personally had, and I'll get back to the Twitter questions here in a second, but you just talked about giving people opportunities to excel at different things. Delaware, we're an unpaid model, so the money is not the influencer here. For me, it's difficult to keep them interested, to keep coming back. How did you kind of maybe approach that in previous situations where you didn't have the financial, the endowment that you made the joke about when we got on the air about Harvard having an unlimited budget, so to speak? How do you kind of deal with keeping people interested, moving them around so that they have fun, but they learn, and then moving them along to where they can be trusted in certain spots?
We do pay people, not a lot, but we do pay people. But it's not about the money. You're completely right. You have to keep people interested, and you have to keep them engaged. A problem I'm running into now, I didn't have at Northeastern. When I was at Northeastern, the entire team was work study students or volunteers, and they were all 100% Northeastern students. So they had that connection. They wanted to work for the university that they attended. They had pride in the sports. If they didn't work games, they would often come to games just to watch them. And it was very easy in terms of commuting. They were on campus already. Everything was easy. This is just, you work for the university, it makes sense. It's not the case at Harvard. Harvard doesn't have a broadcasting department, doesn't have a journalism school, doesn't have a communication school. Harvard students don't, or people who care about broadcasting don't tend to go to Harvard. And so of the 45 students I have on my team, only 3 of them attend Harvard. The rest of them are from, we're very lucky that we're in Boston. There are tons of universities. The rest are from local universities or recent graduates from universities that are slightly further away. And so the way to keep them interested, I find, is multiple faceted. One is to get them involved in everything. If you're separated from the overall production, if you're just focused on your little job, if you're doing camera today and you're just looking through the lens and following the ball or the puck, you're not going to find interest in it. You need to understand the bigger picture. Why are we here? Why are we doing this? Who's watching? What's our goal here? If you talk a lot about parents, and think about if you're a parent and your child is playing at a game here and you're in California and they're in Boston, how do you make it work? So making that connection. I try to give recognition whenever possible. It's always nice when I say, oh, good job. I say good job a lot. But whenever we get good feedback from other sources, either within the athletics department or fans, we have fans emailing all the time, with varying degrees of compliments for what they like and don't like. But if it's positive, I try to forward it along to people who care about it. I try to forward it to the team and say, look, people care about what you do enough to sit down and write an email and say, this was great. So we try to do that. And I think this is a joke I made in a tweet in one of the previous chats, is money is nice, but people care about polo shirts. They care about food. They care about the other stuff. You can't just work them and don't give them anything. And so I try to give them as much as we can, as much as the budget allows, to make sure that they're happy where they are.
Stock is up on polo shirts and free pizza, cold pizza too.
It doesn't even matter.
No, it's very weird. Hey, Chip, make sure you cut me off here if you got a question, because I got hashtag Kafetka chat coming in real quick. So let me get another one of those in, and then Chip, you're up. This one from Jessica Philpeck, who's at Lehigh. She says, is there more value to putting all your effort into one broadcast? I'm assuming this would be a really nice broadcast, or splitting the equipment and doubling your production?
I would say it's better to buy more of the equipment, and then you don't have to decide. I guess you have to be.
That's a Harvard answer.
I think it depends. I think it depends on priorities. You know, if your priority is one sport or several sports, then go for it. I really believe in having good, very thorough, very comprehensive productions where you get a lot of the right equipment, you get a lot of the right people, and you put on a good show that you can be proud of. But you have to back up again and say, why are we doing this? If we're a football school and we care about football, and football is where we make our money and where we get our students, and that's great. But if you're doing this for parents, you know, if you're a smaller school, a D2 school, or a smaller school, and you think, well, you know, we're doing this for the parents, really. The parents don't care if you have 7 cameras or 8 cameras or even 2 cameras or 3 cameras. They care that they see their child playing. And if you give them a nice broadcast that's even just 1 camera, that's all they want. And so that's a situation we're in, and it's definitely a policy I very much believe in, is get the base level for everything. You know, give people what they want, which is seeing their children play. And then, as you get more budget, try to invest more. We do a lot of trickle-down stuff. You know, we have our central control room for hockey and football, and that immediately gets the newest and the best equipment. If we have like end-of-year money, we get something nice, put it in the control room. And then anything that is no longer needed in the control room, we're slightly older, gets trickled down to the other sports so that they get to benefit as well. And that has worked out for us.
Now I have a question on just the time management aspect of everything, and I know some productions spend more time than others, but just could you kind of talk about, I guess, for a football game or a hockey game, how much time is involved, how many people are involved, and I guess then go to, you know, maybe like a wrestling event, like how many people and how much time is involved with equipment and everything?
So pre-production, as we call it, is just the director preparing for what's about to happen, and we do this for everything. From football to wrestling to rowing to every single production, the director sits whenever he wants, hours before the game, days before the game, whenever, and thinks about what the broadcast is going to look like, even if it's basic. We have a document we call our operations sheet. It has general information, logistics for the game, who's your staff, who's working, a script for the commentators, anything we need them to focus on, a list of equipment you need, a quick checklist of things you need to remember so that you don't mess up as you set up. And then the last 2 pages are always a review, something you fill out when you're done, because I'm not at every game, my interns are not at every game, and so we want to share best practices later on. When you're done with the game, you fill out this 2-page review of how did it go? Did anything go wrong? Did anything go especially well? Anyone on the team you want to note that did a very good job or not so much? And so we have this document that we always prepare before a game. That's well ahead of time. We always think about also, as you talked about before, the content. What other content pre-production we want to feature. Some of that we create ourselves during the week when there are no games. Some of that we get from Harvard University, the university as a whole. A lot of academic features we try to send out. Some come from the Ivy League. But we try to think about what kind of time we have and how we fit it all together. Crew call for our games varies between 4 hours pre-game and 2 hours. Football is 4 hours. Hockey, basketball, baseball, lacrosse, 3 hours. Everything else is 2 hours or 2 or 3. Basically depends on logistics, you know, how much time will it take to set up everything, and also what you need to do before the production. For our video board shows for hockey, you know, doors open an hour before the game, so we have to start our show an hour before the game to make sure there's something on the video board when people show up. So 4 to 2 hours. Typically people show up. We show up either in our central control room or a location where we have all our stuff. The entire crew shows up. We take all the gear and we go to the venue and set up. Each person in general is responsible for setting up their equipment. If you're doing camera, you set up camera. And then we have some extra people who set up other things, set up commentator stations, ambient mics. If we have bands at hockey or football, we set up headsets for the bands. Playing music, we set up a music laptop. We make sure everything is set up. We do a full test, make sure everything works. We're getting signals in, getting signals out. We do a transmission test. If we are streaming, we contact Newline, our streaming provider. For an ESPN3, we contact ESPN Transmission, and so on. And then we're ready to go. Our goal is to be ready to go with a ridiculous amount of time left before the game. If we're just sitting there for an hour with absolutely nothing to do, that's great. I'm very happy to pay people for an hour of doing nothing, because that's not always the case, and sometimes things go really, really wrong, and that hour is invaluable. And so we try to do it quickly and efficiently, and then spend the rest of our time either making our broadcast better. If we have a TV game, we tape the open, and we can spend some time on that, or just troubleshooting anything that may or may not be falling apart in front of our eyes.
Now, I do have another question too. You mentioned that you try to put a broadcaster on for every stream. Now, is it a student broadcasters? Is it broadcasters that do like football and basketball broadcasts for Harvard, or how do you get the broadcasters for every single one of the events?
Yeah, so we put commentators on everything. I don't want to have a game without any commentators. Some are students from local area colleges. We have students from Boston University and other. Some are recent graduates, people who graduated from Syracuse or Ithaca College or other universities that have big broadcasting programs. Excuse me, and they reach out to me just because they know what we do, and they say, hey, I'm interested in helping out. Every now and then, because sometimes we have many games at once, we run out of commentators. Football, basketball, hockey will always get 2 commentators. Basketball, we actually do sideline reporting now, so it gets 3 commentators. And eventually, I'm just going to run out of people. And so we try to be creative. We've spoken with coaches, and if we're missing a color commentator, we try to get maybe an athlete who's not dressing, and who's injured, who'd like to contribute. We have a lot of club sports, so a couple of times for volleyball, for example, we've gotten club volleyball players to help out. For women's volleyball broadcasts, we've gotten men's volleyball players to help out. We try to be creative because you don't want just someone sitting there. You want to have someone who's qualified to speak and is knowledgeable about the game, but it makes it more interesting. It makes it more engaging, especially if you can pair them up. If I can put one of my experienced guys who can draw something out of the people who are not as experienced in talking on the air, but who really know the sport, usually works out well, makes it interesting.
Got a question on Twitter for you guys from Ryan Christensen. I'm asking both of you. You'll see why. The question is, what's the philosophy behind posting GIFs of highlights immediately after they happen instead of waiting to upload the video file? And Chip, you're kind of the video file part of that question. And Imry, you're, I'm assuming Ryan, I'm assuming he understands you guys make video GIFs right away and seems to be very impressed with it. So kind of what are your thoughts on the instantaneousness of GIFs versus uploading the video?
I can start. Just full disclosure, Ryan is one of the full-time interns who used to work for me. He was very successful, and therefore he is now doing my job at Villanova. So good job, Ryan.
That's right.
Yeah. So this is something we started this year. We always want to put real live content, real live updates on social media. It's the new thing. It's what people do. We've tried doing very quick video exports, and New Line has this live tag editor feature that they let us use, which allows us to tag something in real time and then export it. Some of our new tech equipment, we can also do that, but it's not, it's very manpower intensive, and also it's not that immediate. It's like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and by then no one cares anymore. And so we've worked with our sports information staff this year. They watch our game live, and they're in charge of posting real-time GIFs. They literally just do a screen capture of the live stream that's going on right now. It has worked out amazingly well. We get
QuickTime, right?
good feedback. Sorry?
QuickTime, right, Imry?
QuickTime what? No, the GIFs.
No, for the screen capture.
Nope. No, they have this app. I can look it up, but there's a Mac app and a Windows app, and it's an app that captures straight to GIF.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And it's really nice. It works out really well, and it's immediate. And GIF is really quick. You don't have to convert it. You just upload it, and it's gotten a lot of great traction.
So then, what do you do with the video, Chip? Kind of what's your guys' stance on that? I know you guys are really powerful in the quick stuff too.
Yeah, I mean that's our whole philosophy is get things up as quick as possible. Eric DeSalvo, our director of social media, most of the time he'll usually record the plays or get gifts. We're on the road, or even at home games too, but more so on the road. And then when we're at home, or if we're all together on a road game, like we were at USF the other night, we were just down the road. I was able to shoot some highlights. We imported them at halftime. We got some stuff posted online. We got a lot of interaction with that. It's really important to get things up and make them immediate. The other thing that we like about having real-time highlights as opposed to GIFs all the time is people love hearing our play-by-play voice, Mark Daniels. He has some great calls. Fans get amped up about that. So any chance that we can actually put his voice with our highlights, we do that. And this past year, I've been able to get a really good system down where I've been able to, get things from our video production team and get them up, posted sometimes, 5-10 minutes after the game. So that's been really efficient, so we can get things up on Vine, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I mean, anything that, as you guys know, anything you can put out there to get your fans excited in the middle of the game just helps out tremendously.
All right, so let me change gears here a little bit, real quick. Got a question coming up on Twitter after this one, but I know a lot of people will do their research on you, Imry, and do the research on kind of what you've done in your time, and they see it as very high level, and almost they want to tune out. And I'm talking about D2 schools, mid-majors that haven't made the investment quite yet, and a lot of people see where Chip's from, and they're like, yeah, UCF, whatever, we can't hang with them. But when you're talking about getting something off the ground, and you're talking about either you've got a single camera or you really want to make the move, kind of take us through what are some of the checkpoints and the barometers that you have hit over your time in launching something from the ground up, and let schools kind of know how close they are budgetarily to having a nice product.
Well, the budget is easy. It can cost anything you want. It's really not expensive to do live streams, not anymore. I say this every year, but it's really getting cheaper and cheaper, which is great. It's great for everyone. I would say start with the basics. You really need a camera to do a video live stream, and you really need audio. Could be commentators, could be ambient, you really need that. Nowadays, that's all you need. There are several cameras out there that can stream straight from the camera. You either plug it into Ethernet, you plug it into or connect it to Wi-Fi or a 4G hotspot, and you're good to go. It's that simple. There are cameras from Sony now and Panasonic and JVC that lets you do that. If not, you can get a Teradek video unit. It's these little boxes that you can plug your video into, and they stream right off wherever you want them to stream. So it's very simple. As I mentioned before, that doesn't excuse you. Budget doesn't excuse you from looking at the little details. I would say a tripod is much more important than a camera. Most cameras now will look good. I would actually take your iPhone, put it on a good tripod, and you'll have a better stream than most. A tripod really makes a difference as you're following a sport that moves, if that's the kind of sport. Makes the difference between an amateurish production and a professional one. It's how smooth your movement is, how efficiently you follow the ball, you follow the puck, how good it looks. So I would say invest in a good tripod is number one. Then get a nice camera, then figure out what you're doing with it, how you're streaming it. That's how I would start.
All right, well, let's talk about some of the options that we've thrown out there. I know that at Delaware we are almost 100% Blackmagic, and I know that's kind of a more on the entry level. The most expensive cost you'll incur is from camera 1 to camera 2. Obviously, that makes complete sense. But what are some of the entry-level options that you've seen or experienced? We have an ATEM, and we like it, but the replay functionality is not completely there with the HyperDecks. So, but we're kind of all in with similar functionality, maybe about 20-30% the price of what the TriCaster that is a little more industry known is. So I guess for some of the smaller schools, maybe throw an all-in entry-level single camera price, and then what do you think adding a second camera and the other elements to that would really truly cost a company or a school?
Yeah. I completely agree. I think the biggest investment is from camera 1 to 2, and then the next is 3 to 4. From camera 2 to 4, you get into serious business. Camera 1, I would say you can get a really good camera for $2,500. You can easily get one for $1,500 as well, and again, your iPhone will do fine. But if you want a camera that has good control over audio and can actually stream from within the camera, so you really don't have to worry about anything. $2,500, and that's it. You know, if that's all you're doing, that's it. If you want to add more, you get a mixer, $100. You get a couple of headsets, $100. You get a couple of cables, and then you have commentators. Again, $2,500, $3,000 is more than enough. You can easily do it for less. Though I would always recommend thinking ahead. You know, you're not always going to be a one-camera show. You don't want to buy equipment that you literally have to throw out if you want to make it any better, because it's just bad equipment. Spend a little bit more money to make equipment to get equipment that can grow with you. So that's camera one. If you go into camera two, a lot of people use Blackmagic, and a lot of people now use Wirecast. Wirecast is a software by a company called Telestream. There is a PC version and a Mac version, and it can basically do anything that the computer you installed on can do. If you can squeeze a lot of cameras into your computer using Blackmagic video capture cards or Blackmagic video capture boxes or anything else, it will take all of them. It will take as many cameras as you can fit in, can take wireless cameras, can take anything, and really allows you to do an interesting production. Allows you to record and stream to multiple destinations if you need, allows you to add graphics in any way or form, allows you to do complex shots like picture-in-picture or side-by-side, allows you to add audio, definitely, allows you to add replays now. They have some rudimentary replay options, allow you to replay the program feed, so whatever people just saw, you can show that again. Allows you to do Twitter feeds now. It's very great, very robust, and it's very popular. I would say, I think you can make it as you have to buy a MacBook Pro. It's $2,000. You buy Wirecast, that's $500. Anything more than that is up to you. You buy as many cameras as you want. MacBook Pros can easily handle 3 cameras now with new MacBook Pros. With $10,000, you can have an amazing production. Amazing, like way more than you can dream of, with great commentators and great cameras and replay and everything you can dream of. Though you can do it much cheaper. Cheaper cameras, you can get little Sony Handycams, everything. Again, you wanna, the broadcast is gonna look like what you put into it. So buy good tripods and spend the time before a broadcast making sure it looks good. I see a lot of people, and I'll talk about the next step in a moment, but I see a lot of people who listen to me or listen to other people and say, Wirecast, I got it, I'll buy it. I have $500, I got it. They buy it, and then they just sit there. And they can't get on the air because they have no idea what they're doing, because they never actually took the time to do some research. So I would say do as much in terms of size of production as you're comfortable with. Don't overreach. Don't say, well, I have a budget for 3 cameras, so I'll do a 3-camera shoot. Well, do you know how to do a 3-camera shoot? Because if you don't, it's going to look like you don't know what you're doing, and that's worse than just having a 1-camera shoot. And we live in the age of the internet. You can Google anything, and you'll find it out. There's no secret to video production. So I really recommend that people know what they're doing. Don't go out to do a broadcast and just guess. Don't take pictures of someone else's broadcast and say, oh, the knobs were this way, and so I will put all my knobs this way, and everything will work. There's just so many problems out there with video and audio, and there's no reason for it. Just spend some time ahead of time looking up what you need to do. And I'll just finish with the last one, jumping from 3 cameras to 4 cameras. That's where it gets interesting. That's usually when you're not going to have just a 4-camera or 5-camera or 6-camera broadcast with nothing. You're talking about a real broadcast. You're talking about multiple angle replays. You're talking about comprehensive graphics. You're talking about score bugs that mean something. There's a lot more to it. So you were talking about Blackmagic Design. They have a lot of equipment that can do that in the higher ranges. Newtek is a big popular company out there. Make the TriCaster, which is a comprehensive production system. They make the 3Play, which is a replay system. There's a lot you can do there, and there are tons of other companies that do this. You have to find what fits your budget and what fits you and what you're comfortable with, because once you're talking about a big production or mini broadcast, it's going to be your responsibility to train people. And if you're not comfortable with the broadcast, or if you bought equipment that's too difficult to teach on a regular basis, then that's going to stop you from doing things quickly and efficiently. You want something that you can teach people quickly and just throw them into it.
You just made it an unbelievable segue, but I got to go back to something else before we go to that segue. So a smaller school that maybe doesn't have the provider or their website provider doesn't have a means of delivery or a place for it to live, what are your thoughts on some of the functionality of some non-traditional live places, the Ustreams, the live streams, the YouTubes? If you're a small school, a D2 maybe, that doesn't have a place for these things to live, what are some of the things that you look at in terms of ownership of the piece and availability across devices? What are some of the things that you have dealt with and maybe recommend?
I am a very, very big proponent, supporter of YouTube streaming. They have come a long, long way since they started. There are pros and cons to everything. Now, YouTube doesn't have any support at all. Not for you, not for the fans. If something doesn't work, you're on your own. But it's extremely easy to set up and gets easier with every passing day because they really keep on improving their interface. It has tons of metrics. You can see how many people are watching and where they're watching from and how they're watching. It has the power of Google Analytics behind it, which is great. It's completely device agnostic. If you can watch a YouTube video on your device, which everyone can, then you can watch a YouTube stream. And it's free. You do get what you paid for. There's no support, which I want to emphasize again, but it's really, really good. It looks really nice, and it's very easy to set up, and everyone supports it now. So I'm a big supporter of YouTube. As you mentioned, there are other ones out there. There are other companies. Some are better than others. Some are easier to stream to than others. I think you have to do the research, but if you're just starting out, I would say go YouTube. They archive everything. You're done with the broadcast, you have the recording right there, and if you don't have the capability to record in-house your broadcast, which is a common thing, you just download it from YouTube because your entire broadcast was captured and recorded on YouTube and you have an archive ready to go. So I would definitely say that.
Interesting fact about what he just said. We're broadcasting on YouTube. It's being recorded right now, and we'll post it later. So there's a little plug for YouTube. Chip, again, interrupt me because I'm getting tweets. The segue you mentioned, you talked about teaching people. The question from Tom Roden from UNCW, he asked, how do you teach people to direct?
So that's interesting. It's a two-part process for me. One is technical comprehension, technical ability, which of course is very important. You have to be very knowledgeable about all the positions you're in charge of, and knowledgeable enough that you can teach people, because that's the real criteria. You can be comfortable operating a camera, but if you're not comfortable teaching other people how to set up a camera and operate it, then you really shouldn't be directing a game. So that's one, and I think that's a given. The other is taking a step back. A director for the biggest game and the smallest game has to be able to take a step back and think about why they're there and what they're trying to accomplish. Is there other content that you want to feature? Is there a story you're trying to tell with showcasing different camera angles, with having the commentators focus on specific players and having graphics ready, with having a specific open that you pre-tape, and there's just so many elements to how you tell the story, and as a director, that's your responsibility. If you're directing tomorrow's volleyball game, I'm not going to go to you and say, well, make sure you focus on that player. That's all you. You have to do the research and work with the commentators and make sure it's ready. And so that's why when I hire my new interns every July, we spend a month just doing test setups. I give them Wirecast, I give them cameras, I teach them everything, and then I give them scenarios. I say, today we're having a 2-camera, 2-commentator wrestling match. Tomorrow we have a 1-camera, 3-commentator water polo event. I just have them set it up, and then when they're not looking, I change all the buttons, move all the knobs, and have them fix it. And so I think that's very important. And then when they're done with that, when I'm comfortable that they know everything that could go wrong, I say, okay, well, what story? Why are we here? What are we trying to do? And that's a very, very big criteria for a director.
Now, I kind of have a long question for you. But with all the years you've done, video production, streaming, and everything, I just kind of want your take on how you've seen things develop in the aspect of, I'm sure, we would have, done replay one way 10 years ago. Now it's completely easy and different. I mean, what are some things like that you've noticed throughout the years with production and streaming? Because it seems like things have gotten a lot simpler than they were 10 years ago, when it was a lot more difficult to stream an event.
I think everything is getting cheaper, which is a big, big factor. You don't have to have a lot of money to have a good production or any production. 10 years ago, the big schools streamed, and if you had a big donor, you streamed. Now anyone can stream. There are tons of schools out there streaming, and you don't really have to have a big budget for it. You don't need to look too far to find equipment that's compatible with your kind of budget or your kind of setup. It's all available out there. So I would say that's the biggest trend. What I've seen more in the last couple of years is more of the smaller schools, the D2 schools, the non-NCAA schools, trying to do more than just stream. Because there's a difference really between, I think we talked about it before the chat, a stream and a broadcast. With a stream, you point a camera and you follow the ball. Congratulations, people can see what's going on, which is great. A broadcast is you trying to tell a story. It's more than a camera. It's a comprehensive story, and a lot more people are trying to do that, which is great. Because you can afford more of the equipment, because there are so many more people out there who can help you, and because there are more resources. You can Google cheap video production now and just figure out how to do it. It means you can spend your time trying to figure out how to make it more interesting. I think it's a huge, huge trend, and it's just growing. You know, I'm surprised every year to see how many colleges out there are still not doing this, and how they're trying to get into it. And I think that's great. I think the more the merrier, and there's a niche for any person now. There's a niche for any university. You can make anything happen.
Another question from Twitter, this again from Nina Raspa. What's your view on the importance of post-production features? I'm assuming then to reciprocate back into another broadcast, either to highlight the athletes off the field or more hype videos. What do you kind of see falling into your broadcast? And then on the on-demand side stuff, maybe that doesn't hit broadcast, stuff that's short for social. What are your views on highlighting athletes on the field or kind of hype stuff?
I think it's very important. You know, it's live ends when the game ends, but then what do you do with all this content? We record everything we have. We record B-roll. We record establishing shots. We go and interview athletes, and so I think telling the stories is very important. But we touched about it earlier, and I think we talked about it in last week's chat, is there's a trend now changing the complete mindset around what's a story to tell on social media. You know, people used to say a feature. Okay, I will take 15 minutes or 30 minutes, and I will tell you a long story about someone and their life. That changed in the last 10 years to be, well, you know, people don't have the attention span for that. 3.5 minutes, that's what we're going for. That's a feature. Sit down, interview, do some B-roll, we're good to go. People don't even watch that anymore. It's now, what can you fit on social media? How can you use Periscope or Vine or GIFs or anything that's really, really quick to tell a quick story and get people hooked. And so I think that's very important. I think that's very interesting to really cater to the medium. Long features definitely still have their place. 3.5 minutes is, you know, we have to fill our halftime with something. So you don't want to have a series of many 30-second videos. You want long features that people enjoy. But if you're trying to get post-production up, if you're trying to tell a quick story and feature the athletes that are on the field or on the court, I think looking at social media, you want something that's quick. Quick doesn't mean bad. You know, you still want good content, and that means good shots. It means quality shots, but it also means an interesting story. If your story is not interesting, it doesn't matter if it's 30 minutes long or 30 seconds long. It's just not an interesting story. If you have an interesting story to tell, you can really do it in whatever time is allotted to you, and people will watch it. You know, if it's interesting, people will watch it and will share it.
Imry, I kind of wanted to get your take on this. This is something that I've kind of realized over the past couple of years with kind of supplying content and gathering content during games and during events, but posting content and creating it after a game is really almost like a separate job for someone in production, because I think people don't always understand that, hey, oh, you can just throw that up on social media or give us that play. It takes time to go in there, cut everything up, and get all that you need. And, you know, sometimes after you're working like, 5, 6, 7 hours on a production, it's like the last thing you want to do is go in there and cut everything up and edit it. So that's why, most times either me or I have, an intern make sure that they go through everything after a game and, do post-game, cut everything up that we need to, because, it takes a good few hours after the game sometimes to even tape a press conference, throw B-roll over it, and, post it up online. Just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I absolutely agree. Something that I've tried to implement at Harvard, and I think it's worked out very well, is delegating. Not just delegating to my team. I have my interns. They're going to do a good job. When we're in the office 9 to 5, of course they're going to create content. But we have a staff of 5 very talented, very qualified sports information directors, and their job is to tell the story for their sports. They each have their allotted sports, and they're supposed to tell that story. Sometimes that's writing a feature story on a website. Sometimes it's writing a game recap or a game preview or game notes, but it's telling a story. And so at Harvard, part of their job is telling a story through whatever medium they feel is is required or is helpful for that story, and that includes video. We work every year on making sure that they have the newest video editing software and that they get video tutorials. It's something that I go through with them every year, make sure that they know how to edit videos, they know how to tell interesting stories, they know how to set up shots, and they create a very high percentage of our video content. I help whenever I'm needed, and my interns help whenever they're needed. But the sports information staff does a very good job because they're actually more familiar with the athletes than us. They work with them day to day. They have their assigned sports. They know what's interesting. They know what's relevant. And so they really can get to the bottom of the story and make it worthwhile. You don't want to just point a camera. You want to make it interesting. And they do a really good job. And we use a lot of that content as part of our broadcast and pre-production and post-production.
Question for both of you guys, for myself personally. We at Delaware create a piece that's called what we call the recap, which is basically a post-game presser or an informal interview, depending on the sport, with B-roll over top of it. Chip just kind of alluded to it. And then we've started to create melts, condensed broadcasts from the production for the games that we do a production for. Which do you see being more valuable? Do you feel like, what ends up being or what could end up being a 4-minute long cut-up press conference with B-roll over top of it is as powerful or valuable as that highlight melt where it's just straight condensed game and it's almost more informational? What are your guys' thoughts on, do both exist? Does one come out first? That kind of stuff.
Go ahead.
You can take that, Imry. You can go first.
I think they both have value. We used to do, for basketball, New Line used to do condensed game for us. Instead of 2 hours, it was 20 minutes and no one watched it. That was just too long, and so we've stopped with that. Currently, for our home games, my team is in charge of, whenever we have big games like basketball and football and hockey, in charge of the game recap. We have our replay system, our replay operator. They have all the clips at their disposal, and so they create something like your melt. They put it to music. They have a graphic at the beginning, graphic at the end, but it's highlights. Here are all the goals. Here are all the good plays, with commentator audio, and we use that audio to tell the story. The sports information staff for some games does press conference interviews with the coaches ahead of time and posts it separately, and they both get pretty good views. When it's away games, my team doesn't travel to away games. We have enough at home. So the sports information staff goes to away games, and they either get footage, a melt, a program feed, something from the away team, or they shoot it on their own. They do some interviews with the coaches, and they do exactly what you said, a compilation of both. It's the coach talking over B-roll of what they're talking about. And that has worked out well. I think it depends on logistics. It's what you can do in the time allotted and the resources you have, but I think they both have value.
Yeah, I completely agree. And also the way that we kind of look at it is at UCF, it's kind of a feel thing too. Like, for example, basketball games, since we're in basketball games, obviously basketball season, but I've got either 1 or 2 interns that their sole job is to make sure they get the post-game interviews packaged together with highlights, and usually after every game we will have an interview with the coach or a player with B-roll over top of it. It usually lasts about 90 seconds, and because we just think that's really the limit, since the majority of our views come up on social media. And then depending on the kind of game and if it's a huge win, like for example, like our game against UIC, we did a post-game recap. I posted up a couple of highlights, the next day. For USF, and we beat them, we had the same thing. We had the immediate, post-game recap with Coach Jones, some highlights. Next day, I put together a very fancy highlight package, and then we repurposed a lot of those highlights for other things on social media. So I think, too, you don't want to say it kind of depends on the game, but sometimes it does, because your fans do react differently to certain teams that they play as opposed to others. So that's kind of where we dictate how some of our content is with post-game recaps and interviews.
I know for me, with the journalistic background, the recap becomes more of a news piece, where you want to get those bites in there, you want to get the clips in there, but it's for us starting to run its circle and kind of becoming a thing that people don't necessarily watch anymore, because we've started to add the broadcast melt. And I did that because I didn't want to take that whole game and we put it up to watch in its entirety, but why not a condensed version of it? And Imry, you're right, we're a New Lion client as well, and we saw the opportunity to do a 20-minute, and no, that's too long. So, we cut that down to 3, and we have the broadcast audio in there, Chip, which you alluded to earlier. So I feel like that melt is a really good blend. It's a very quick and easy thing to do. It will tell the story if it's cut the right way. And then that recap can come at another time, depending on the situation, Chip, something you alluded to as well. So you're right. I do think they can coexist. Sometimes Delaware a little lately with men's basketball specifically on a 14-game losing streak, I can't take those views and really take them to heart. That's not a reflection of our efforts or our work. So sometimes, how do you guys handle the ups and downs of seasons? I know the ups always feel so good, but the downs, it really wears on you sometimes when the views aren't coming because the team isn't performing.
Well, it's what's the priority. Do you make your views or not? Obviously, views count for something. If no one is watching, then you really shouldn't be doing anything. But views can be misleading. It's as you said, views have very little to do with the quality of your video most of the time. With feature videos, it's a little bit different. It has a lot to do with the interest in the team and how the team is doing and specific players. We have a hockey player now who's up for a big men's hockey award. He's a nominee for that. And so we get a lot more views on our hockey team. They're also doing very, very well. We haven't changed anything in our recaps. Our recaps aren't better. They're just getting significantly more views. And so I completely agree. It's understanding the broader context and just continuing on with your job, realizing that there are ups and downs.
Yeah, at UCF, we went 0-12 this football season, so creating content post-game was a little bit difficult. And to be honest, there were some games when we didn't post any videos or any recaps, quite frankly, because some games you didn't have enough highlights to really put a highlight package together. And, even in the post-game press room, the stuff just was kind of, the same thing said over and over again, and we just didn't want to keep posting that stuff up on our website. Now, of course, going 0-12 is, kind of an anomaly. Sometimes most teams never ever do that, and hopefully we'll never have to deal with that kind of a situation again. But we did take some plays, during the game that were great catches and stuff like that. We would post those, repurpose it, so we would get interaction on social media and everything. And also I did a lot more stories outside of the game where, we had a fan that, was diagnosed with cancer. He came to the game, got to watch it in the athletic director's suite, so I kind of followed him around, did a couple of features like that, and that's just another way to create content while the team isn't doing that well.
Perfect. All right, Imry, we're going to get you out of here, but I want to ask you one more question. Well, what's next? What's next for Harvard? What's next for you? I saw you tweeted you just put out a new camera that's dedicated, and you'll use it for something else. But how are you pushing the envelope? How are you making things happen? And what do you got next for us?
So 2 things we're trying to do. One is expand the repertoire of sports we're streaming. Harvard has 42 teams. This year we're up to 32 that we're streaming out of the 42. We added fencing, which I guess we should have streamed this whole time because there's nothing logistically difficult. And we added indoor track and field, which is just a logistical challenge on its own. And we're looking to what's next. We're not streaming golf or skiing or cross country, but what else can we support? How can we be creative with the resources we have to make it interesting? A couple of years ago, we added tennis and squash, which is challenging because there are many, many courts happening at the same time, and how do you do that efficiently from a budget perspective? And what we're also focusing now is expanding our reach. It's how many people are watching and where they're watching. We're working with ESPN3, I mentioned, with New England Sports Network. We're working with other broadcasters. I think that helps motivate us. The more people are watching, the more broadcasters are watching, the better job you want to do, so you're creative with what you have. Where can you put a camera? Where can you put a mic? What kind of features can you play back? If there's someone in the penalty box, can we show them? Can we put a camera behind the backboard, which you talked about? It's all these little things that don't cost a lot of money, but when a lot of people are watching, you think, well, how can we be creative? We have the tools. How can we make it look fun?
Well, Imry, thank you so much. Hey, time for a shameless plug. We've had you for 63 minutes, but I want to get a couple more minutes from you. Talk about the importance of this organization. Obviously, Chip and I have a little more vested interest, and we're very excited to have you involved more and more and more. But why is this an important thing for you to be a part of as we continue to grow CAFEDCA on the collegiate level? I know you have some involvement with SVG, but why is it important that there's a college organization like this?
I think, and this is something I talk about a lot, we're all in this together. People always ask, how do you talk to people from Yale or people from Princeton? You guys compete with each other all the time. I don't compete with anyone. You know, people aren't going to think, well, should I watch a Yale broadcast tonight or a Harvard broadcast? We don't have that competition. We're all in this together, and we can learn from each other. I mean, we're all dealing with the exact same problems. We're all dealing with the exact same hardware or software or questions about features or how should we approach this problem or that problem. The opportunity to talk to people who live the same life that you live and deal with the same problems that you deal with, is helpful. It's nice to do, but you also learn so much because, you know, if you don't ask any questions, you're never going to learn anything new. And we all have slightly different expertise. We all do things slightly differently. And whenever you hear something that makes you stop and say, you know, I never thought about that, it's worth the whole thing. It doesn't cost any money. Just sit there and think. That's worth the entire organization.
Well, Imry, thank you so much for your involvement. We're excited to have you involved some more. As we mentioned earlier in the broadcast, this was on YouTube, so when I hit stop broadcast there on the screen, it will immediately, give or take 5 minutes, of course, be posted onto our channel. I'll post that link onto Twitter. Thank you to everybody who asked questions. We're really, really excited about how this continues to grow. We'll do another Twitter chat next week. If you want to take over a Twitter chat, if you want to be involved in a hangout, just tweet at us, either the hashtag or the account, and we'd love to have you involved. And again, for Chip and Imry, I'm Jimmy Smith. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Thank you.